This is Rebel Raiders on the High Seas from GMT Games. This is a first edition I have here. I don't know if they made any map changes in the reprint, which I think is still available on GMT's website. But this is one of the coolest games on the American Civil War I think I have ever played. It's definitely one of the coolest in my collection. The thing I like about the game is most games on the American Civil War, they focus on the land side of things, and rightly so, and the naval warfare is abstracted. This game takes the reverse approach. You're playing as, basically, you're Gideon Wells, and you're trying to run the Navy for the Union, and on the other side, you're the Confederate director of, all the naval action. I don't remember if that was consolidated in one position or not. Jeff Davis was a bit of a control freak, so I don't remember if they had a Secretary of the Navy. Anyways, in the game, you're going to be, as the Union, setting up your blockade of the coastal ports of the Confederacy, and as the Confederates, you're going to run blockade runners from neutral ports, picking up cargo from the Caribbean, Mexico, Europe, and you're going to be trying to deliver that to these ports along the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast. You've also got to keep the Mississippi River open to commerce, and so each turn, the Confederacy is going to be bleeding a die roll's worth of victory points. And what you do to increase your victory points is delivering these cargoes. The other thing you can do is you can use your raiders, which are expensive to build. And so what you do with your raiders, though, is they can be very, very effective at just nickel and diming a lot of victory points by raiding in the high seas areas, not the coastal zones, but the high seas areas, as well as the Pacific whaling grounds. So if you can get in there, it's kind of an area within an area. If you can get in there and raid, then you can rack up a lot of points in that area. To thwart them, you have, as the Union, screw sloops that can, every time you try to raid, they try to catch you. And the more you raid in the same place, the more likely it is they will catch you. If they catch you, then you have a brief naval engagement. And so there's kind of a tactical, operational feel to the game, and yet it has this strategic scope, which makes it just so cool. It just kind of hits on all 3 points of there's a tactical feel to the naval battles when you fight them out. You can even use Iron and Oak to fight out some of the battles. I'm not as big of a fan. That would really cause this game to take a long time to play, and I'm not as big a fan of that game. I think that the tactical system in here works great and fits the flavor of things. To really give the game flavor, there's a deck of cards. It's not a card-driven game, but there's a deck of cards, and you use the cards to enhance your generic pieces. For example, a generic gunboat can be turned into the USS Unadilla or the USS Powhatan. Can be a screw sloop can turn into the Powhatan, or a gunboat can turn into the Hatteras, and that will last just for a short duration in the game. Usually it's just one turn or one combat, and then you substitute the generic marker for the specialized marker, and the card gets discarded. It's really a cool way of capturing all of the flavor of this period. You're responsible as the Union for capturing 3 critical areas. You have to capture the Mississippi, which consists of the port of New Orleans, Vicksburg, and Memphis. There's 2 forts along the way that can wither on the vine and turn into Union control regardless, but they don't really they don't affect the victory conditions. That would be Baton Rouge and Island number 10. You also got to capture Atlanta, and you've got to capture Richmond, of course. In this particular game, the Union start off great. I mean, immediately they captured Memphis, Nashville, grabbed Louisville. I know I have the wrong marker on it, but I just do that because at a glance I see round markers, and I use it to count how many cities have been captured. It's just easier for me. I know not to count the square-shaped markers. Anyways, very early they captured Louisville. On turn number 1, grabbed Nashville, got lucky in Memphis, and held it against several counterattacks. Took Chattanooga, Kennesaw Mountain, and got into Atlanta before the mid part of the game. Got into 1863, and they are set up to win this thing. And then the dice just really turned against the Union. They couldn't They couldn't take Vicksburg for nothing. Porter had his mortar boats, and he kept killing all of the gun batteries there, but could not win the battle. It was Longstreet who was in charge of the defense, and in this particular case, he's representing a more diligent commander than Pemberton. So anyways, Longstreet was defending that, just very, very effective in stopping the Union. So they had to start, using the land route. But here's the thing. You only get 2 attacks per turn on land targets. In order to launch more attacks, you have to buy them during your production, and they're very expensive. So the Union was having to stop building ships and start building these land attack opportunities, and it just kept whiffing on them. Finally, we get down to the 1864 turn, and finally Farragut captures Jackson and St. Philip. That fort held out against, I think, like 3 amphibious assaults before they finally took it. And it wasn't even that heavily defended. It was just the Union just had terrible luck when it came down to the land die rolling. But Farragut on the second to last turn took the fort, captured New Orleans next. That was actually a more iffy proposition, but he was able to take that one as well. Now all they got to do is grab Vicksburg. So by this point, they've captured Corinth and Meridian, so they were able to use the land route rather than try to send Porter in and get shot at with his flotilla, which was under strength by this stage of things. This time, they won. On the very last turn, December 1864, he took it after 2 tries. The first try was interrupted by, you guessed it, Nathan Bedford Forrest. This guy's a real pain in the butt. But he was able to keep the Union out of Vicksburg on the first go, but they had 5 attack opportunities because of Loose the Fateful Lightning. So he used the second attack to take Vicksburg, and that time they did take it by 1 point. They got in there. Finally, the Mississippi flows unvexed to the sea. This fort here will wither on the vine and switch over to Union control if the game were to go on another turn. The Confederacy has no way of capturing it. So for all intents and purposes, they surrender. So the Mississippi's the Union, Atlanta's Union. Now you got to deal with this mess over here at Richmond. And the only way to attack Richmond is by land, and there's 3 batteries, which means they're going to throw a default of 2 dice, plus 3 for the batteries, plus 1 more, because on the last turn I used Longstreet in Richmond. And so I didn't use him over here because I used Bedford Forrest to break up the first attack. And the second attack, I just figured, well, we've been getting pretty lucky there. So, and all I had left was Longstreet because Stonewall died on the previous turn. So I decided to use Longstreet over here. I withheld him. So after Vicksburg fell, I figured he's going to hold this for sure. And once they hold that, that's it. Game over. Confederacy's probably going to win unless the Union draws the card to extend the game 1 more turn. But that's a big if. I used the Confederacy's production to buy a counterattack just in the off chance that might happen. So I felt safe to go ahead and throw Longstreet into here. Lee allows 2 rerolls. I think they threw 7 dice in total, and they were all very mediocre. Use Lee to re-roll some of those, and you get bonuses when you roll like doubles or triples or something. You get bonuses to your highest die roll. I think the final modified roll was a 7. And so for the Union, I'm throwing a total of 5 dice because I've got Phil Sheridan. He's giving me a bonus. And so I decided, let's just throw 2 dice, and we're going to get a plus 3 to the die roll, because we were withholding 2 of our die, or withholding 3 of our total attack dice, and I rolled boxcars for the Union. And so on a freak result, the Union ended up capturing Richmond. Now Lee can only be used, I think, for 1 attack, so I was withholding the Rally Men card just because there was 1 more cannon marker left and Loose the Fateful Lightning. And I had a card to get rid of Loose the Fateful Lightning, because if he loses 1 attack, then I use this to get rid of 1 attack marker, and then I've still got Rally Men for rerolls if he goes 1 more throw at Richmond. But as it turned out, none of those were necessary, And the Union ended up winning it on a just, wow, ridiculous die roll at the end. Snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. I really thought the Confederacy had this one in the bag. They went into the turn with like 20 victory points. So the Union has to capture all of these locations. And they were able to do so. It was a very exciting turnaround to the game. Both sides enjoyed spurts of good favor with the dice, and just a lot of cool action all the way around. This is also one of those Civil War games that doesn't take a long time, super long time to play. I mean, you have probably the longest turns are going to be the ones in the middle of the game, where you're doing more with the blockade runners and with the raiders. As the blockade gets tightened up with lots and lots of ships, the Confederacy is going to have fewer blockade runners to build and try to run that. It just becomes a law of diminishing return. It's usually more effective to invest more in raiders. And so once you have fewer ships to maneuver around, the game actually flows really, really quick. And so the last few turns really don't take a whole lot of time. But if you have any interest in the American Civil War, this is definitely one I highly recommend checking out. The rule book it's okay. I never had a really problem with it. Some players have had a problem understanding how to play the game. It's probably easier to learn from somebody else that knows how to play it. Like, the game is not as hard as the rule book kind of makes it seem. I think that's probably the best way to explain it. The game is not as complex as you would imagine from the rule book. But once you've gone through like the examples of play in the playbook, I think it's a pretty straightforward game, common sense rules, and really some neat ideas in this one. So definitely worth checking out if you have interest in this particular area.